Well, we'll cross to the other side of the studio now, where Dipti Laurent is here for our second look at the world's papers. Dipti, you're starting with the British papers today, rejoicing after the return of those two British Iranian citizens from prison.
That's right. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anousheh Ashouri languished for several years in Iran's notorious Evin prison. Charity worker Zaghari-Ratcliffe was accused of plotting to overthrow the clerical establishment, while engineer Ashouri was accused of spying for Israel's Mossad. But it's Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe today who's making the front pages of the British papers. The smile that says, "I'm free," that's what the Daily Express says, adding that her release after 6 years, quote, brings hope to a troubled world. Mummy's home at last. That's how the Daily Mail puts it, rather emphatically on its front page. The paper explaining that the freedom of the two prisoners was secured thanks to the British government paying off a £400 million debt to Iran in a move that could pave the way for smoother nuclear negotiations between Iran and the West. But, Erin, we live in a cynical world, and this cartoon from The Telegraph's Matt Pritchett warns us that this rare bit of good news is out of the ordinary. Normal service will be resumed shortly, he says in this rather cynical cartoon.
Cynical, sad, and sadly true.
Exactly.
Also making headlines as he speaks to Germans now, to German lawmakers. Well, Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday spoke to U.S. Congress, and that's what papers are talking a lot about today.
That's right. A lot of the papers are headlining on his imploring video address to Congress, in which he evoked 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, paying with our lives for freedom. That's how the Polish daily Gazeta Wyborcza sums it up on its front page. Le Temps, the Swiss paper, hailing Vladimir Zelensky's charisma, his courage in, quote, bringing into question Joe Biden's governance and for stirring up the world's conscience about what's happening in Ukraine. But the paper says Biden has drawn a red line at sending troops or planes to Ukraine or imposing a no-fly zone for fear of provoking a new world war. They applaud Biden's courage for sticking to this red line, for being able to say no to Zelensky, especially at a time when Joe Biden himself is not very popular amongst voters.
Now, Russian papers, Dipti, are talking about a completely different speech yesterday. That was Vladimir Putin's address, in which he threatened Russian dissidents and railed against the West.
Well, the Russian daily Kommersant is headlining on this speech, this video linked to a speech that Vladimir Putin gave lawmakers on Wednesday, a speech with a tone of, quote, "Whoever is not with us is against us." That's how Kommersant puts it on its front page. The paper Kommersant is actually owned by Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov, but it is fairly critical of the Kremlin at times. In this article, they say that it's clear that Vladimir Putin is not at war with Ukraine, but he's at war with the West, and that means he needs to understand that the West will fight him with all types of weapons, including what Vladimir Putin considers economic sanctions. The president's tirade against the West was at times unprecedented, even for him, the paper says. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin is isolated. He's visibly angry at the West and surrounded by yes men. The similarities have been drawn time and time again since the invasion of Ukraine. Cartoonist Kevin Sears today wondering if Putin is just Hitler in another mask.
Indeed, no shortage of World War II comparisons, Dipti. Let's change gears now. Here in France, a proposal by Emmanuel Macron to offer autonomy to the island of Corsica has sparked fierce backlash from his presidential rivals.
That's right. Corsican autonomy has always been a thorny issue in France, Erin, and it unexpectedly sort of entered the French presidential elections because of days of unrest on the island. It comes over the prison beating of Yvon Colonna, a nationalist hero and convicted murderer who killed Claude Erignac, Corsica's government leader, in 1998. Emmanuel Macron's proposal of autonomy to the island has been slammed as sort of a easy vote-grabbing move by his election opponents. We're just weeks away from the first round of voting here in France. Macron plays the autonomy card. That's how Le Parisien, the French paper, puts it on its front page, in a headline that also indicates its cynicism. But the paper's editors warn that Corsica has never brought any luck to French politicians seeking to answer its demands for autonomy, so that they're sort of cautioning Emmanuel Macron this morning.
All right, let's end on something a bit lighter. The new phenomenon called Goblin mode, and we're perhaps all more guilty of it than we would think.
Exactly. Two years of a pandemic that began with us, staying at home for 3 months and learning to cook and bake and exercise and be healthier, better humans in general. Well, now as we're easing out of those pandemic restrictions, it appears that the phenomenon of the inverse has occurred. It's called Goblin mode. It's a state of mind, a way of life, you might say, that's an antidote to green juices and exercise and self-improvement. It is, drinking Coke for breakfast. It is eating pasta from a pan, melting cheese on anything. This article says it is not wearing makeup or wearing yesterday's makeup, not washing your hair, not cutting your hair or cutting your own hair. So it depends. It can also be Zoom meetings with no pants on, or organizing your own party and then leaving as soon as it begins. And it is, in a nutshell, embracing your inner slob, reneging on all social conventions, and being proud of it.
Certainly something that none of us here, of course, at France 24 are guilty of.
Never.
Laurent, we'll end it there. Thank you very much.
That's all good.
That's good. At least there's that.